All right, back again on the podcast is my pal, Dr. Mark Greenspan. Mark is a viticulture expert with 3 decades of scientific, technical, and field experience, and he's a certified crop advisor, a certified professional agronomist, and a licensed pest control advisor in the state of California, and the founder of Advanced Viticulture, which is a leading vineyard services company in California. Before we talk about the topic of the day, which is red flags for planting a vineyard, can you tell the listener a little bit more about what you and your company do and how you got started?
Um, Primarily, I'm a viticulture consultant, and technology integrator. I've been servicing clients on coastal California, mostly in the North Coast, but now we're kind of all over mostly the coast of California. We do work other areas. Viticulture consulting, largely focusing on irrigation management, also uh, nutrient management, fertilizers, that kind of thing, and also vineyard development. But pretty much everything to do with viticulture. We also do work with a lot of sensing technologies, and we're pulling those things together to help make sense of ongoing management issues, but mostly irrigation. But water is always a big thing. I also have a farming wing to my company. So we have roughly 500 acres under management up in the North Coast, the ones where we farm, North Coast of California.
Yeah. When I met you originally, Mark, I remember you were primarily doing the consulting, the technology integration, really used you as a resource for water management. Soil moisture monitoring was something that I really learned a lot and gleaned a lot from your experiences on. So you mentioned water as one of the primary resources you work with as a consultant and a technology integrator. And so let's talk about the vineyard planting red flags now. And for me, one of the number one red flags for planting a vineyard is water issues. I tell growers, if you are planning to plant a vineyard, don't even call the nursery or even have the site evaluated if you don't have either enough water, if you haven't had the water tested for not only the output of the well, but the water quality. And if you don't have a well on site, that could be hard to do. So
Yeah.
when growers are approaching a site, what are some of the red flags for water quality? So if, let's say there's a well on site, what should a grower be
Mhm.
looking at in testing that water?
There's definitely things I look at primarily, and it's going to be salinity of the water for one. In some areas, sodium and especially chloride can be an issue. So that's an issue. pH, overall pH. Most well water is above neutral, but if you start getting into the eights, like eight and a half, that can be problematic, especially if you have uh, hard water, which most wells are. So you have to look at the calcium, magnesium, and the bicarbonates and carbonates levels. And the other one that's really important is boron. There are some areas of high boron in California in the well water, and that's a serious red flag.
Let's start with the topography, drainage, not just water drainage, but air drainage
Mhm.
for
Yeah,
freezing and frost events, and just slope in general. Slope can be good for drainage, but bad for driving your tractor. So what are you looking
absolutely.
for? What are some red flags in site topography since you brought that up?
Yeah, that's pretty complicated, but I think if you want to find the major red flags, it would be um, first of all, yeah, is your area prone to frost, either spring or fall? And then you want to have some areas that have slope that potentially can be above the frost line or allow for cold air drainage off that slope. But then the slope itself adds and subtracts from the feasibility of the vineyard. Um, we find generally that for most varieties, especially red varieties of wine grapes, that slope hillsides are better than flat. A lot of that's just the way that the variable temperature changes on a hill slope are different than a bottom ground. Bottom ground tends to have more extremes, hotter and colder, and slopes tend to allow for um, little less heat at the high end, but also they don't get as cold. So you tend to have a better ripening conditions for a lot of grapes, especially red grapes. So slopes are great, but when are they too bad? So if they're excessively steep, uh, that's
What is excessively steep to you for telling someone, okay, you can still farm this, but you might just need special equipment? Is it more than 15 degrees? Where do you kind of start to bring in
yeah.
the need for either specialized equipment or just don't even farm it?
So, yeah. I think 30 degrees is usually the kind of the cutoff for not 30%, not 30 degrees
Percent. Yes.
percent. 30% slope is usually well, there's a lot of things to go with it. Apart, um, but I'd say feasibility of driving a tractor a 30% slope. You still might need a crawler, but I personally would get a little freaked out about some of these slopes. But when 30%, most people can tolerate. When you start getting above that, then it starts getting dangerous, or at least kind of scary, and you really got to need at least a crawler. Once you start getting up to 40, above 40, I know there are vineyards that are like that.
How far
Mhm.
does a vineyard need to be away from another vineyard for most things to not be an issue? Okay,
I mean, I feel good about a mile.
a mile.
um,
Okay,
or half a mile probably would be okay as well. A lot
okay,
of it's going to have to depend on what's the prevailing wind direction.
okay.
Um,
Downwind,
yeah.
upwind, right?
If you're
Okay,
downwind, then you're going to be further away. If you're upwind, you don't need to be as far. Um, but they will move when it's not windy too. So,
yeah,
like vine mealybug, the males are the ones that move. They can fly. Females not so much, and so a lot of that has to do with, like you said, physical movement of them on equipment and people and vehicles, that kind of thing.
yeah.
So yeah, you can't be too far, but I'd say that a half mile to a mile is probably a nice rough idea.
Got it. Got it. Well, so location, proximity to other vineyards, roadways, getting a truck in to bring your grapes from your vineyard to your winery. I think these are all things that need to be considered. I want to go back to the slope really quick because I
Yeah.
forgot to ask you about your opinion on terracing. When I get questions, even back when I worked in Virginia in 2005, we had a lot of steep slopes there. Growers needed to find hard scrabble, rocky soil to grow Cabernet Sauvignon on, or Cab Franc, in order to really ripen it. And they were hitting upwards of 20 to 30% and having special tractors. And sometimes a grower would come to me and say, hey, could we terrace this? And the
Okay.
process of terracing, if done properly, even can be very challenging because you're disturbing the soil a lot. So,
Yep.
you're taking the bottom soil and bringing it to the surface and vice versa. Have you
Mhm.
seen terracing as a successful compromise for steep slopes in some cases?
No.
Okay, okay,
So
thank you. I'm so glad. I didn't want contradicting advice here, but
yeah.
I don't not saying you need to agree with me, but I feel like the
No.
consensus for most professional viticulturists is no. But why?
I'll tell you why they're good. First of all, they're beautiful. And I always like to see terraces. And I think that's why I fell in love with vineyards, because of terrace vineyards. But then I got into the business and I realized that this is a massive amount of soil. You're not getting that many vines per acre. So your production is not that great. I mean, if you're in Napa and at least you were getting $20,000 a ton for your grapes, you could make it work that way and have a terrace. But for most of us who grow even premium wine grapes, terracing doesn't give you enough vines per acre to make it work. And then you have the problem of the environmental problems. I mean, most places now we can't, it's not even legal to terrace, to create terraces, unless you're replanting a vineyard that's already terraced. But to create new terraces is not going to be accepted by most counties, in California, at least, and probably other places as well. So really terracing is a no-no. And, they erode. You plant a vine on the end of a terrace, and sometimes you plant it on the foot, the heel, and the toe of the terrace. The one that's on the toe, the part that's about to fall off, will get eroded over time and eventually start exposing roots. And it's just really not good, not good. So We don't do that anymore. Pretty much when we plant a vineyard, we're always planning on running rows up and down the slope as parallel as possible to the slope.
Yeah.
That brings up the concept or idea of aspect as well. So which way that slope is facing? Is it facing south or is it facing north? You're gonna have in the northern hemisphere, at least, you're gonna have a lot cooler conditions on the north facing slope than you are on the south facing slope.